Welcome to the next installment of the Trainmaker.
Today I'm continuing the mini-series on railway practices that are seen as difficult or impossible in one country and are quite commonplace in another. In particular, I'll talk about the difference between an aspect of rail freight in New Zealand and Switzerland. Often in New Zealand, when you hear the suggestion that more freight should be moved by rail, you also hear the response, well, that's hardly possible in New Zealand because there's so many goods that can't be moved by rail. And quite often the example of supermarkets gets trotted out. Well, supermarkets have many suppliers and goods have to be moved directly by truck from the suppliers to the supermarkets, and most supermarkets are not anywhere close to the railway corridor, so it doesn't work to supply supermarkets by rail. And well, since it doesn't work with supermarkets, it doesn't work generally because supermarkets are seen as the most important supplier of consumer goods here in New Zealand. And so that's the general nub of the argument. Of course, already at the moment, some of the goods for quite a few supermarkets are moved by rail. Coca-Cola, for example, distributes beverages from its Auckland factory to logistics centres throughout New Zealand by rail. And from there, these beverages are then supplied also either directly to supermarkets or to supermarket distribution centres. Other suppliers to supermarkets also move goods by rail through the country. But yes, it is true. Neither Foodstuffs North Island, nor Foodstuffs South Island, nor Woolworths use rail in the national distribution network, as far as I know. But that's not because it's impossible. Rather, it is because those companies designed their distribution networks that way. I find the supermarket argument a bit strange because in Switzerland it is exactly the two main supermarket chains, Migros and Coop, that do most of the long-distance transport by rail. Goods are normally transported from manufacturing centres to distribution centres by rail, and in Switzerland there are quite a few manufacturers. Imported goods are normally also moved by rail to distribution centres, and any movement of goods between distribution centres is also done by rail freight. Coop uses the company Railcare for most of its rail freight requirements. This private railway company runs full consist trains for its various customers of consumer goods throughout Switzerland. And Coop is the major one. It's also fully owned by Coop. Railcare moves goods between distribution hubs in swap bodies. Some of the swap bodies are for cooled or frozen goods. In Switzerland, these trains have to fit in between the many passenger trains, so the operation and scheduling has to be quite precise. From these hubs, the distribution centres, the goods are moved by small trucks to the supermarkets. These trucks are loaded according to the exact stock requirements of the supermarkets they serve. Much of the stock is kept in the distribution hubs. Oh, this truck here moves goods for the Migros supermarket, but Coop has similar ones. Now, for the Zurich metropolitan area, Coop has developed a different system. There it prepares swap bodies in a distribution center about 35 kilometers outside of Zurich, and then brings them by train to central Zurich, and from there they are moved to a truck, and by the truck then to shops throughout the wider Zurich area. All that makes logistics and stock control significantly more efficient. Generally, most supermarkets in Switzerland are not that big, and they do not have such a large car park as here in New Zealand. In Switzerland, Co-op and Migros markets are everywhere, and generally they are far more local. And the price is generally the same, whether the supermarket is in a big shopping center, or in a suburb, or in the inner city. Only a few supermarkets are more expensive, for example, those in exclusive tourist centers, or those that serve as convenience stores, for example, in stations. Because supermarkets are supplied through the distribution centers, those costs can be kept at a similar level. The Co-op hub for Bern is in Niederbottingen on the railway line to Neuchâtel. Here, trains from other parts of Switzerland bring goods to the distribution center, and from there then the small trucks deliver the goods to the supermarkets. By the way, the distribution center is right next to the Toblerone factory. Here, Toblerone chocolate is manufactured for worldwide supply. If it's Toblerone chocolate made in Switzerland, it's from here. The former Toblerone factory buildings in Bern today house the Faculty of Theology, and also there were several libraries. Also the Theology Library with with quite a few books on Near Eastern archaeology. I've spent many a day in here. As you can see, railways can supply supermarkets by using well-located distribution centers with rail connections. In New Zealand, with the long distances between metropolitan centers, moving consumer goods between distribution centers by rail is possible, but it's not how the supermarkets designed their supply chains. Well, our actions and systems are most often determined by choice rather than necessity, whether that necessity is economic, political, or moral. And that brings me very neatly to the issue of free will. Free will is a philosophical and theological issue that has been debated over the centuries. In theology, it's been generally related to the questions of sin and salvation. Well, and even though there have been many different positions, overall theologians seem to agree that humans have at least a tendency towards sin, but also can respond to God's offer of forgiveness and salvation. And if we trust in God, then with God's help, we are also more able to choose good rather than evil. Well, one of the choices you should not make is to drink Coca-Cola just because a lot of it is moved by rail in New Zealand. That would be very unhealthy. If you really need bubbly, I think a healthier alternative would be to drink homemade lemonade, such as this elderflower lemonade, which I've made here. Yes, it's got sugar, but it's nice and fermented and bubbly and tastes very nice. A lot better than Coca-Cola.